While the Iron Islands are made up of many great and large houses that play influential roles, not just in the history of the Iron Islands, but Westeros as a whole, there are just as many smaller, minor houses. While their roles and place in history is much less significant, each of these in their own way still left an impact on the Iron Islands. Some even do have more interesting roles in the wider history of Westeros than you might imagine. Consider this: the way kingship used to work in the Iron Islands, with kings being chosen via kingsmoot and not necessarily via inheritance from father to son. Even these minor houses can have a loud voice when it comes to the kingsmoot. While the larger houses can use their influence to sway other houses to vote for certain candidates, the vote of the larger houses is still at its core is worth the same as the minor. The process of the kingsmoot gives these minor houses power and influence, even if individually it is minimal. But when you consider the minor houses as a voting bloc, they can have power to sway the kingsmoot one way or the other, the same way the larger houses do. In this video, we will be taking a look at the history and lore of some of these more minor Ironborn houses. Before we start, something to consider for the sake of expediency is most, if not all, of these houses, both large and small, claim a shared origin legend and myth, claiming descent from the legendary Grey King, who is said to have ruled for over 1,000 years during the Age of Heroes. Like many myths, it is hard to separate fact from fiction when it comes to the tale of the Grey King, but the key point is through him the Ironborn houses claim a shared origin, which in turn deeply influences how their culture developed and the relationship between each house. House Cod, in terms of their reputation in the Iron Islands, is actually quite sour, which is reflected in their motto, though all men do despise us. Given the house name, their banner depicts a silver codfish on black. While we do not know when and why House Cod gained their poor reputation, we know by the time in the main book series they are thought to be nothing but thieves and cowards, whose women are loose and wantons, who practice incest with their fathers and brothers. How much of this is true is not known, but we do meet a handful of the members of House Cod during the main book series. During a Feast for Crows, we are first introduced to Left Hand Lucas, who is a supporter of Euron Greyjoy when he declares himself king in the wake of Balon Greyjoy's murder. Lucas, when the Cods attend the Kingsmoot at Naga's Cradle and Old Wick, other members of the house, including Elred Cod, play the fingered dance with Carl the Maid, and loses. Left Hand Lucas is amongst those feasting in the hall of the Lord Hewitt's castle after the taking of the Shield Islands. He wears a tapestry he had torn from the wall as a cloak. After the feast, he assaults one of Lord Humphrey Hewitt's daughters. Later, during a dance with dragons, we meet one more of the many members of House Cod who are left to defend Moat Cailin in the north, when Victarion Greyjoy returns to the Iron Islands for the Kingsmoot. These Cods are among the men killed for refusing to surrender to Ramsay Bolton. House Humble from Old Wick is another house we know a fair bit about, while missing some key information, such as their sigil and house words. Our main interaction with the house comes via Adric Humble, a one-armed raider known for having a rock wife and 3 salt wives. The fact we know so little about the house is because they are said to have descended from children of perhaps thralls or salt wives. Some members of House Humble are spotted at the Kingsmoot on Old Wick by Victarion Greyjoy. Will Humble, one of Victarion's supporters, loses a bet there and has to eat his boots. Quillian Humble allies himself with Euron Greyjoy at the Kingsmoot. What is interesting here, it shows how 2 members of the same house can vote differently at a Kingsmoot, and they don't necessarily have to vote for the same candidate the Lord of the House tells them to. Quillian informs Victarion of the presence of 3 warlocks on Euron's ship, Silence. He is later spotted by Victarion at the feast in Lord Hewitt's castle after the taking of the shields. He tears down one of the tapestries and wears it while he eats. It is during the events of A Dance with Dragons we first meet one-armed Adric Humble, who is part of the garrison Victarion left behind to defend Moat Cailin when he returned to the Iron Islands for the Kingsmoot. When Dagon Cod refuses Theon Greyjoy's offer of safe passage in return for surrendering the fortress to the Northmen in the siege of Moat Cailin, Adric kills Dagon. After they surrender, however, Adric and his fellow Ironborn are flayed alive under the orders of Ramsay Bolton. House Ironmaker's arms nor its words are known to us, but they do have an interesting role in the Kingsmoot during a Feast for Crows. Eric Ironmaker the elderly head of the house whom claims to have sailed with Lord Dagon Greyjoy during the reign of King Aerys I Targaryen, put himself forth during the Kingsmoot, where his champions were his grandsons. His gifts are silver, bronze and steel. His speech gathers some support, but Asher Greyjoy demands he stands up, which he cannot do. After that his support crumbles, and his claim is dismissed. Aeron Greyjoy later sees Eric shouting his support for Euron Greyjoy. During a dance with dragons while at 10 Towers, Asher learns that Euron, now king of the Iron Islands, arranged a marriage with his niece and Eric. Since Asher fled Old Wick after the Kingsmoot, a seal was used to stand in her place for the ceremony. While Euron wages war on the Iron Throne, Eric is left ruling as Lord Steward of the Iron Islands and Castellan of Pike. Asher has no desire to return to her new husband. House Kenning of Harlaw is a noble house from the island of Harlaw. According to some sources, the house blazons its arms with the storm god's cloudy hand, pale green, yellow lightning flashing from the fingertips on black. They have a cadet branch of the house, House Kenning of Case, created by Harrock Kenning, whom in his age was a renowned warrior. The Kennings were once bitter foes of House Harlaw, but were defeated and are now vassals. During the main book series, Ralph Kenning is an Ironborn captain under the command of Lord Captain Victarion Greyjoy at Moat Cailin in the north, after the Ironborn invasion. He urges Victarion to stake a claim to the Seastone chair after the death of Balon Greyjoy, and is one of his foremost supporters at the Kingsmoot that followed. During a dance with dragons, Reek, really Theon Greyjoy, meets Ralph at Moat Cailin. Despite nominally being in command of a number of men of House Cod as the Castellan of the ruined castle, Ralph has been poisoned by Cranachman's arrow and is badly incapacitated. Reek mercy kills him. House Merlyn of Pebbleton is a noble house of the Iron Islands. They are one of the primary houses sworn to House Greyjoy. Their seat is located at Pebbleton, on Great Wick. According to some sources, they blazon their arms with twin waterspouts, green on white, during the events of a Clash of Kings when Theon Greyjoy returns to the Iron Islands for the first time in a decade after being taken as a hostage after the failed Greyjoy rebellion in 289 AC. He sees many men of House Merlyn at his father's Great Hall. Later, during the events of the Kingsmoot, they support the claim of Asher Greyjoy, the daughter of the late Balon. House Myre is another house who hails from Harlaw. They are vassals directly of House Harlaw after they were defeated by them, and the whole island of Harlaw coming under the control of their rival. They blazon their arms with 10 nooses, 4, 3, 2 and 1, black on white, with a border of blood. At the Kingsmoot, to choose the new King of the Isles, Asher Greyjoy sees the banner of the house among those gathered to support her own claim to the Seastone chair. House Orkwood of Orkmont is one of the oldest noble houses of the Iron Islands, with their seat being on the island of Orkmont. They blazon their arms with dark green pines strewn close together on yellow. It is said that Rognall II Grey-Iron, the legendary king of the Iron Islands, was brought down by an alliance of Ironborn lords and Andals, which included the Orkwoods. The Orkwoods supported Euron Greyjoy with 20 longships when he made his initial claim to the Seastone chair. Some Orkwoods do gather to wish Victarion Greyjoy well on the shores of Naga's Cradle before the Kingsmoot, which may suggest not all of the house support the claim of Euron. Lord Alyn Orkwood, called Orkwood of Orkmont, ultimately supports Euron during the Kingsmoot. House Saltcliffe of Saltcliffe is one of the Ironborn noble houses of the Iron Islands from the smaller island of Saltcliffe. According to some sources, the Saltcliffes rule the Isles and are named after it rather than them naming the Isles. The sigil is a 9-headed serpent, black on silver. The Saltcliffes are among the houses to go to Pike when Lord Balon Greyjoy summons the Ironborn to crown himself King of the Iron Islands during the War of the Five Kings. House Sparr of Great Wick is one of the smallest of the Ironborn houses of Great Wick. Their lands are about 6 leagues from Hammerhorn. House Sparr's lord is known as the Sparr. According to some sources, they blazon their arms with an oak saltire on blue. During the events of a Clash of Kings, the Sparrs were among the bannermen of Balon Greyjoy, whom Theon Greyjoy sees in the Great Hall of Pike preparing for war. During the War of Five Kings itself, Balon declares himself the first king of the Iron Islands, as well as parts of the north, with the Sparrs among the first to support them. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Lord Sparr and his son, Stepherin, accompany Gorman Goodbrother to bring news of the death of King Balon to his brother Aerion. 2 members of House Sparr meet Victarion during the Kingsmoot in Oldwick, meaning some may have supported him during the vote. In A Dance with Dragons, Roderick Sparr presents the wizard Mokoro to Victarion near the Isle of Cedars during the journey of the Iron Fleet to Meereen. House Stonehouse of Oldwick is a noble house from Oldwick. They are one of the main houses sworn to House Greyjoy of Pike. According to some sources, they blazon their arms with a black brazier on a grey masonry field in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons and the downfall of Dalton Greyjoy in 134 AC. The then Lord Stonehouse was put to death by the Westermen of Lady Joanna Lannister after she invaded the Iron Islands. During a clash of kings when Theon Greyjoy arrives at Pike after a decade away as a ward of House Stark, Aerion Greyjoy tells him that Dagmere Cleftjaw had gone to Oldwick to summon the Stonehouses and the Drums. The houses of Oldwick agreed to support Balon during the War of Five Kings, and are one of the first to do so. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Red Ralph Stonehouse urges Lord Captain Victarion Greyjoy to make his own claim to the Seastone chair, and he is one of Victarion's champions at the Kingsmoot. Victarion's brother Euron Crowseye is instead chosen as king. At the feast celebrating the taking of the Shield Islands in the Reach, Ralph is among those who shout down King Euron's plans to sail to Slaver's Bay, preferring to instead attack the Arbor. During the events of A Dance with Dragons, Victarion Greyjoy gives Red Ralph the Iron Fleet's swiftest ships to sail the Corsairs' Road along the northern coast of Sothorios, where they are provisions for men who are not afraid to pay the iron price in mud and blood towns in the Basilisk Isles. Victarion orders to return to the southern tip of the Isles of Cedar. Only 9 of the ships that set sail turn up, with Ralph himself among the missing. House Volmark of Volmark is a noble house of the Iron Islands. Their seat of Volmark is on the island of Harlaw. They are sworn to House Harlaw. They have a large holding of land on the island and have a long and decorated history. They blazon their arms with a black leviathan on grey. After the death of Harrenhal and the burning of Harrenhal, Lord Corin Volmark tried to claim the title of King of the Iron Islands, as his grandmother was the younger sister of King Harwin Hardhand. Corin was slain by King Aegon I Targaryen during his invasion of the Iron Islands in 2 AC. Gorin Greyjoy, Lord of the Iron Islands, defeated a conspiracy to crown Corin's son later in 33 AC. A Lord Volmark was put to the sword by the Westermen during Lady Joanna Lannister's invasion of the Iron Islands in 134 AC in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons. When the Kingsmoot is summoned after the death of Balon Greyjoy, Lord Roderick Harlaw calls his bannermen in Asher Greyjoy's name. Among others, the Volmarks gather at 10 Towers. While standing ashore at Oldwick, a Volmark greets Victarion Greyjoy. Tarl, the thrice-drowned, claims that Lord Moran Volmark has the best claim on the Seastone chair. Aeron Greyjoy spots the banner of House Volmark among the dozens gathered for the Kingsmoot on Oldwick. During the Kingsmoot itself, however, all of the lords and captains are free to choose their candidate, and Maron supports Victarion. After Euron is crowned king and the Ironborn take the Shield Island, Euron Greyjoy names Merlyn as Lord of Greenshield. Victarion interprets it as a way to reinforce Euron's prestige by gaining the support of the young lords, who descend from Black Harren's line through his mother. House Wynch of Ironhold is a noble house of the island of Pike in the Iron Islands. They are among the Greyjoys' principal bannermen. Their seat of Ironhold is on the other side of the island from the castle of Pike, the seat of House Greyjoy. Their blazon is a bloody moon on purple. Following the death of Dalton Greyjoy in 134 AC in the wake of the Dance of the Dragons, Alistair Wynch and Gunther Goodbrother held Faircastle as the Iron Islands fell into chaos. Gunther eventually slew Alistair in a quarrel over Lysa Farman. During the events as seen in A Clash of Kings, when Theon Greyjoy arrives at Pike, he sees a great number of longships, including some bearing the banner of House Wynch. When he enters his father's great hall on Pike, he sees Wynches amongst the captains of his father. Later, during a storm of swords, Sir Aladale Wynch, a ranger of the Night's Watch, is slain by wildlings in a fight at the Bridge of Skulls. Sir Aladale is believed to be one of the very few members of the Watch to hail from the Iron Islands. During the events of A Feast for Crows, Christopher Botley explains to Asher Greyjoy that Lord Walden Wynch was the first man to recognise Euron Greyjoy as King of the Iron Islands. Thus, House Wynch were given half of the lands of House Botley for supporting Euron.